So we're in central Pennsylvania today. It's a beautiful, little bit overcast October day, and we're here to shoot waterfalls. We're going to be spending all day shooting waterfalls today. One must-have accessory for waterfalls is a neutral density filter. Canon happens to have an adapter for the EF to RF mount that includes a drop-in variable neutral density filter. It goes about 2 stops to maybe 10 or 12 stops. I'm going to try it out today, see how I like it, and at the end, I'll tell you what I think. Okay, so let me tell you what I think of the Canon EF to RF adapter with the drop-in variable neutral density filter. But first, let me tell you what I've used for neutral density purposes in the past. So basically, for all my ND purposes, I have 3 filters. I have a 3-stop, a 6-stop, and a 10-stop neutral density filter, all in one size, all in the 82mm filter thread. And this fits all of my lenses. So lenses that I have that are smaller than 82mm thread, I use a step-up ring. So for example, my 135 f2 lens has a 72mm filter thread. I use a 72 to 82 step-up, and I can use these ND filters with that or any of my other lenses. So the only drawback to that was basically I had to, if I was shooting a lot of ND stuff like what we were doing last week with shooting waterfalls, every time I changed the lens, I would have to change the filter from one lens to the other. And if the amount of neutral density needed to change, if I needed to go from the 3-stop to the 6-stop, I would have to take one off and put one on again. Slows everything down. It would be more convenient if I could have something like a variable neutral density filter, which basically just covers everything. The way a variable neutral density filter works is there's a wheel on it where you can turn it, and it will adjust the amount of neutral density from 2 or 3 stops up to like 10 or 12 stops. Super convenient, and when I heard that Canon had this adapter that fits between the EF lens and the RF mount, which I have a lot of EF lenses and now I have an RF mount for the Canon mirrorless camera, I was very excited about it. I thought it would be great. So I went out and got one ahead of our big waterfall trip, figured I'd use it for that, and really try it out and see how I liked it. Well, it turns out, I'll tell you right up front, I don't like it, and I'll tell you why. So basically the way a variable neutral density filter works is you have 2 polarizing filters right next to each other. And when you turn the wheel, those polarizing filters will rotate against each other, thereby kind of canceling each other out. So if you've ever looked through a polarized piece of glass while you're wearing polarized sunglasses, you'll see everything kind of just blacks out. It's basically the same effect. You're polarizing light, and it just kind of cuts out all the light. And depending on how much of that light you want to cut out, you can rotate the whole contraption and adjust the filters, and it'll vary how much light is passed through. So in theory, that sounds great. But in practical use, when I actually got there, tripod on the ground, had my first shot set up, I put my adapter between my lenses, and I got ready to shoot. I just didn't like the control of it. I didn't like the images I was getting. I just didn't like the way it worked. Now I know there's color shift issues when you have it's really stopped down with the ND filters. There are color shifts and things like that. I knew all of that stuff going in. I knew of the limitations of a variable ND filter compared to a single stop ND filter. Now, just to let you know, I've never had any trouble with my ND filters. I use B&W ND filters for all my different degrees of neutral density. Colors, no problem ever. Perfect colors coming through. Never had any problem, even if I combined my 10-stop with my 6-stop and really darken things to an extreme. Never had any problem with any of the colors. First thing I noticed when I started using the variable ND filter in the adapter was if I stopped it all the way down, if I closed it down to let very little light in, down to, they don't even advertise it, whatever it is, 10 or 12 stops, the color shift is extreme to the blue and purple. Now, it's correctable. You just back it off a little bit and the colors kind of normalize. But what if I needed all of that extra ND? So if I wanted to shoot a 30-second exposure, the way that I was set up, I wouldn't be able to. I'd have to tone it back to maybe 15 or 10 seconds when maybe that's not enough. And then even when I did, if the color shift if the color issue is that big a deal, when I darken it that much, I can't be 100% confident that the colors that I'm seeing, once it looks normal, the colors that I'm seeing are actually really the colors that I want. Maybe there is still a little bit of a color shift in there that I'm getting that I'm not going to be able to correct later on. I'm not used to that. I'm used to getting nice, pure beautiful color first time through the filters that I have. So, when I first started using it, I would apply just a little bit of neutral density to it and then kind of bump it up just a little bit at a time. And I really started getting used to how it worked. And it was working better the more I used it. You have to be very, very careful with fine tuning the control wheel on there, because the control wheel is very small and just a little touch to it will change it a lot, especially if you start getting up to the extreme ends, and it can change your exposure by a lot. So make sure you don't mess with it once you have it in place. The problem is finding that exact exposure where the color shifts and everything were okay. And then on top of that, I like using polarizers, especially when there's wet things involved and leaves and rocks and things that I like to be able to polarize and take the glare off rocks and logs and things like that. I like to be able to polarize that light. I use circular polarizers in a lot of situations. So knowing that this has polarizing filters on it already, I thought maybe I can use those built into the variable ND filter to try to cut out some of that glare to try to polarize the light. And I couldn't, using those, the way they adjust against each other, couldn't quite get the light polarized the way that I wanted it to be. So then I had to add a polarizing filter on front of the lens, try to cut out some of the glare and try to polarize the light that way. And then it kind of even made things worse, because now the colors were even odder that I was getting through the ND filter, and it kind of just threw everything out of whack. So really what I ended up doing after maybe half hour or an hour of really fumbling with this and getting frustrated and not getting what I wanted, is I ended up basically just not using the ND filter and just using my regular EF to RF adapter. And I already had a 6-stop ND filter with me, so I ended up just using that for all of my shooting the rest of the day. And the images I got were wonderful. I had no problem with color shifts or anything like that. I'm sure that you can make it work if you want to fine tune it, but I was finding the time that I was saving by not having to change filters, whether changing it from one lens to another or changing the amount of neutral density degree that I had on a filter, changing from a 3-stop to a 6-stop, the amount of time that I was saving on not having to do that, I wasn't really making it up using the variable filter, because there was too much fine tuning involved to get it, and I couldn't get the length of exposures that I really wanted. So in addition to that, I know there's an issue with ultra wide lenses with these variable ND filters, and that there could be dark lines and dark bands in them. And I ran into the same situation. I had a shot all set up with my 15mm ultra wide lens, and I put the filter in the middle there, and I darkened it, and as soon as I did that, I had a big huge X, a dark X going right through the image. Anything less than a full effect of the ND, the colors were kind of all weird. There was rainbows coming through, but the colors were odd. I couldn't use the variable ND filter with my 15mm lens at all. I got nothing useful out of that. So right there, it doesn't work for that either. And I have a ND filter that I use with my 15mm lens, a B&W filter that's always worked great, never had a problem. So in conclusion, I don't like the variable ND filter adapter. I really so much wanted to like this thing. I love the idea of it. I love the concept. I do like the idea that there's a circular polarizer that drop-in that now I can get for much less than having to buy the whole adapter with the drop-in filter. I can use the adapter that I have with the slot, and I can get a circular polarizer and drop it in there, and maybe that'll work better. I like using polarizers anyway, so I'll give that a try. So it's not all to waste, but I'm not going to be using this for my neutral density needs going forward. I'm totally happy. I've always been happy with my neutral density filters that I have, the 3-stop, the 6-stop, the 10-stop. It didn't work the way that I wanted it to. I wasn't getting the images that I want, and if you want to try it out, I'm going to put a link below in the description. You can check it out. You can go, if you want to go to your camera store and check it out there, do that also, but for me, it just didn't work. So that's just my honest assessment, my honest review. If you have any questions or anything about this or any other ND stuff that I talked about here, put them in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. I'm going to put links here to videos that we did about using ND filters and taking long exposures, especially in daytime, so you can check those out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.